Do you view Jesus as your king? Psalm 132 looks forward to the anticipated Messiah, the king that was promised to David to arise out of his line. The first half of the psalm, the writer, whether it's David or one who's speaking in his behalf, or even one from the outside, the writer asks the Lord to remember David and his self-denial. And then the second half of the psalm is interesting because the writer asks the Lord to not reject the anointed one, that is the Messiah that would come out of David's line. When I think of David's self-denial as expressed in this psalm, I think of what John chapter 5 and John chapter 6 say, how Jesus told the people that he came to do God the Father's will, not his own. And so God's will, God's purpose was foremost in his mind and his mission. The entire psalm refers several times to the place or the dwelling, that is, the meeting point at which God would dwell among his people. It refers to the house, refers to the place, the dwelling place, the resting place. And all of these references to the place refer ultimately to the Messiah and how David anticipated that the Messiah himself would reign eternally. We are privileged as believers in Jesus Christ to understand God's presence in a much greater way than David and the people of Israel could understand and appreciate. They knew that in their experience, God met them and that he would dwell among them in Zion, that is the resting place, the temple, the mount on which Psalms 1 and 2 refer to, on which Jesus the King would reign. And we, again, are privileged. We are the ones who, as Ephesians chapter 3 points to and reminds us, we are the ones in which God's presence now dwells among us through his Holy Spirit in a greater way than the people of Israel could fully understand, even though in some aspects they anticipated and longed for and knew that there was something better yet to come. And whether all the people as a whole realized this, David himself realized that out of the promise he was given in Psalm 2 is reflected in many of the Psalms throughout, since that point to the present. In Psalm 132, David anticipated this king and tried constantly to put himself in the king's shoes. And so whether David speaks again, as I mentioned a moment ago in Psalm 132, or another from the outside, whether it is those or one who is trying to voice or experience David's perspective, or just another who is reflecting on the promises given to David, this psalm, like all the psalms, looks forward to the king. We know this king as Jesus Christ, and it is because his presence is among us now. For as God says in John 1:14, God's presence came to dwell among us in the person of his Son.